The Red River Farm Network is excited and proud to celebrate women's role in agriculture here through this month. Agricult-HER is made possible by the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, among others. Our guest today is Carolyn Olson with Olson Organics out of Cottonwood, Minnesota. First of all, just give us a background of your history with agriculture and what it is that you do today.
Well, thank you for having me. Uh, my entrance into agriculture isn't the traditional route. I grew up in the Twin Cities metro area, graduated from Anoka High School, which at the time was the largest high school in the state. And in college, I met my husband. We were not going to the same college, but that's the time frame that we met. And I married on to the farm, and he and I have been farming together for just over 35 years.
Wow. So, how did that transition work? Did you have misconceptions about agriculture? I feel like that'd be really intimidating to walk into a situation like that.
I have grandparents and aunt and uncle that farmed in Iowa, and we would get to go spend summers on. So I had an inkling of what agriculture was about. But my parents did say, that this isn't a 2 week thing. This is an everyday thing, right? Once Jonathan and I got engaged. But, uh, you know, I think because my father in law and Jonathan um, they were so patient with me, and they allowed me to ask questions. They allowed me to learn. They allowed me to make mistakes without making too much fun of me. Uh, it made it, I think, an easier transition than if I was expected to know more.
So, of all of the career choices that are out there, you talked about, meeting Jonathan in college and whatnot. I'm guessing there were a lot of different options for what you could have done. What led you to going into farming?
you know, I just, well, first of all, love that is what I think ultimately brought me down here. We got married in a drought year, and the corn for grain, not silage, but the corn for grain was being harvested at the end of August that year. And we called home on our honeymoon. We got married in August. We called home on our honeymoon and heard that my father in law was harvesting corn. So we actually hurried home, cut our honeymoon short by only a day, but we pulled into our farmyard where we would be living, and the combine was unloading into a grain wagon. And this was 1988. And we said, we'll quick change clothes and we'll be out to help you. Our friends had decorated our house, so we weren't that quick to get outside. We had to do a little cleaning first. But that's when I learned how to move corn wagons, and I learned how to drive the very first tractor I learned how to drive. All of that happened right away. And I just dove in with it, and I just loved it.
Was it a difficult decision? What did you go to school for? What was that transition like?
I went to school for recreation, as in Parks and Recreation. It is an actual major. And I knew I didn't want to be inside all the time. I knew that I would not thrive if I was just sitting at a desk all day. I'm not a numbers person, so all of those careers were out the window for me. But agriculture to me gave me what I was desiring without having to worry about the politics of a job. And I actually didn't enjoy the the one Parks and Rec director that spoke to our class said it was just a lot of brown nosing and taking the mayor out to lunch, taking council members out to lunch, and constantly having to fight for your programs. And the way he described it, I thought that would be awful. And now I see a different side of it.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the policy side of things and the politics side of things. Uh, you're involved in several different organizations and have seats on boards for a few different. Talk a little bit about your roles. Of course, Minnesota Farm Bureau, also AURI. Tell us about that a little bit, and maybe how that kind of has changed since your college days.
Yeah, we were approached to join Farm Bureau by a neighbor of ours, and at the time they called them area program directors. Now they're membership and marketing specialists. But the MMS at the time, it's like, well, he didn't do a great job of selling it to us, so we turned him down. A few years later, the same neighbor came with a different MMS, and they convinced us to sign up for Farm Bureau. We had not been involved in any farm organizations besides pork producers up until that point. And we got involved right away because we were getting close to the cutoff for the end of the Young Farmer and Rancher program. So we knew we needed to get involved right away. Met our first friends in Farm Bureau that are still friends today. Got involved, and I ended up then serving on our county board, and then ran for our district director position, and then about 2.5 years ago ran for vice president when that opportunity rose.
So now, serving as vice president, you work on a lot of policy and that sort of thing. Is that something you had envisioned for yourself at any point?
It's really not. It was on a Young Farmer and Rancher trip to Washington, D.C. I remember we walked into Congressman Peterson's office, and I think it was like our second, maybe third visit of the day, and people were hesitant to walk through the door. His office was pretty intimidating at that time. And, you know, I think I got a little annoyed, a little impatient that everybody was so hesitant because it was grilled into us that we had a timeline. We need to walk in, take our photo, then we can sit down and have our conversation because votes were happening and they could get called away at any time. So I just started walking through the door first, and that was the office where I did that. I walked through the door first. I got to stand next to the congressman, shake his hand, and he asked me for my story. And that is where the light bulb went off, that it's not about brown nosing, it's about relationship building. And people took an interest in my story. When I would be the first in the room, I would get those few minutes to myself while everybody else was lining up. And they were genuinely interested in what I had to say. So that is kind of the spark that kind of changed my trajectory in advocating for agriculture.
So now you've served several different roles and had the opportunity to have a voice. What does that mean to you, and what does that mean to your operation?
I think for me, it's just such a joy to be able to bring my friends' stories to different offices, to be able to build those relationships, to share my own story. We are organic farmers, which is something different. That's it's not a general farm organization. We don't have a lot of us that are really working hard at advocating for agriculture that are on the organic side. But we have a lot of organic members out there. So being able to bring that voice, but as also being able to advocate for my neighbors who farm conventionally, that brings me a lot of joy. And also helping people make the connections with elected officials, that I just love watching their light bulbs go off, and I love watching them see the realization that they are making a difference as well. And I represent Farm Bureau on the Agriculture Utilization Research Institute. So I serve as Secretary Treasurer on that board. And the relationships that I've made with elected officials in Farm Bureau has translated to that board as well. We have the chair of the House Ag Committee, the chair of the Senate Ag Committee, both sit on the AURI board as well. I'm also on the board for the Center for Rural Policy and Development, where I also sit on the Farm Bureau seat there. And those connections, too, have really paid off in that role. And I'm brand new to that board. I've just been on there for about a year, so I'm still figuring out what impact I can make. But just it feels very fulfilling to be able to bring our members' stories and the policy that our members in Farm Bureau have brought up and influence other boards as well that impact them every day.
So let's go back to the farm here. What does a typical day look like for you? We know in agriculture that changes with the season, it changes day to day, but just kind of typically, what does that look like on a normal day?
Well, this time of year it's kind of quiet for me. I'm not in the pig barns. We have employees that do that. So, but I did used to manage a nursery barn when we had a nursery barn. And when it was just Jonathan and I farming together before we had employees, then he and I would be in the barns together quite often. So I don't have to do that part anymore. So this time of the year, it's a lot of meetings for me. So it's nice that I don't have a lot to do. But once we get rolling in the spring, I love running the field cultivator, prepping the fields for seeding, and then in the season, I have a lot of meetings throughout the year, so I help out when I can. But as organic farmers, we don't have a lot of downtime in the summer. So in the winter is when we take our vacation time as well as having the meeting and event time. So and then in the fall, I run the combine a lot and help out wherever I need to, and then help out with tillage where I am needed as well.
So, as the first female vice president of Minnesota Farm Bureau and the only female on that board, I'm sure you get a lot of exposure to different experiences through that. But for other women who are maybe a little bit intimidated to be that first person through the door, what piece of advice would you give them, or just tidbits to think about when they're in those situations where they maybe have an opportunity to get in a little bit more involved, to have a little bit more of a voice, to jump in?
I for a long time I struggled with imposter syndrome and felt like I didn't have what it took. Other people saw in me that I had the knowledge, I had what I needed. I wouldn't have gotten elected to the positions I have been had they not seen that. And I needed to be bold and kind of swallow my fears to take that step, but I just knew that I had a voice in there. But I think as women, a lot of times we discount our knowledge and we discount the impact that we can have. But I think having been the only female on a few boards now, including our planning and zoning commission in our county that I sit on, we need all of the voices to make a complete picture of agriculture. Women are involved in the daily farm decisions all over the United States. And, there's a lot of cases where they might have an off farm job as well, but they're still making and helping make those decisions if they're talking with their spouse or partner about what is happening on the farm. They have a vested interest in that, and with that comes knowledge, and they have a perspective that is different from others. And I think that brings a valuable view of what agriculture actually is. And I think a woman's voice is important. And you don't have to be try and fit in a stereotype. You can be all frills and diamonds and everything, and not feel bad about it. We don't have to fit that stereotype. You bring who you are, and that voice is super important.
Who are some role models that you have looked up to that have kind of, you know, maybe they know it, maybe they don't, that have inspired you to take those chances and to step through those thresholds?
Oh man, I know I'm going to forget names. There are so many women who serve in roles as employees of farm organizations. Amber Glazer was our public policy director for Minnesota Farm Bureau for a long time, and she was such a great cheerleader for me that she made me feel I could do anything. And I just appreciated that vote of confidence so much. And Whitney Place, watching her at the Department of Agriculture in Minnesota and now as Minnesota's FSA director, and how she handles everything with such grace. But yet she is such a connector and such a promoter of others. Um, it makes me want to make sure that I am also promoting others and helping to be their cheerleaders as well. In North Dakota, Val Wagner. I've known her for so long, and I was so excited when she was also voted as their vice president of the North Dakota Farm Bureau. And just the way she carries herself and the way she interacts with others, just it's a great example for how to handle things with grace. And those are the types of women. I know there are tons of others. There are multiple women within the Minnesota Department of Agriculture that have had leadership positions. Andrea Vaubel is another one. And how they carry themselves and how they are so authentic has been such a great example for how I can act and still be respected with what I have to say.
All right, so switching gears just a little bit here. I know you already had a great story about your first trip to DC, but other kind of turning points in your agriculture life and experience. Are there a couple memories that kind of stand out to you uh, that were those turning points?
I think just the encouragement from others at various stages, whether it was running for my county board in Farm Bureau, or even a few years ago being asked to be on our planning and zoning commission within the county because of relationships that I had built. The the turning points, I think, have been maybe a little bit more subtle in my experience, and it's just been the right people saying the right thing at the right time, and that encouragement and the relationships that I have with others um, has changed the trajectory, and it has changed how I think about my voice and my husband's voice and what we're doing on the farm and how we can be impactful to our neighbors. You know, I also was a part of the Minnesota Agricultural Rural Leadership class. I was class 10, so a few years ago. And the leadership journey I went on there really helped. And I think that was probably one of the biggest obvious change makers in my life. Just learning the leadership skills and where I fit in and how to use my gifts authentically um, probably was a big reason why I had the courage to run for vice president and have taken other opportunities as they've come up and not been afraid or felt that I couldn't do it.
All right, so any final thoughts, any other pieces of your story that you want to share with us before we let you go?
I just appreciate so much the friendships that I've made since I became a farmer in 1988. Uh, not, it's easy to think that you have to come in to the farm through family inheritance or as I did through marriage. But there's a lot of opportunities. We know people who the female is the primary farm owner and the husband has the town job, and I love that. And everybody has such a unique story to share, and everybody has such a great way of looking at agriculture from their perspective that I learned so much from so many people. And I think it's important as we're looking at leaders in agriculture that we also, if that is where we feel led, to be able to keep an open mind, to keep a curious mind where you can feel free to ask the questions of the things that you don't know, asking people about their lives and having that background, I think makes you well-rounded, but I think it also helps people to understand where you're coming from, that you don't have the agenda that they might think, that you want to serve you want to serve others, and you can't serve others if you don't have that relationship with them. So it's kind of a long, meandering way to say, relationships matter, and we need to be cheerleaders for each other as well, because that is what impacted me the most.
Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for taking the time to inspire us and talk with us and tell your story. Again, Carolyn Olson joining us here as we celebrate Women in Agriculture throughout the month of March.